Primo, which...
Which is the best place to go to get bakso?
Just off the street.
Just off the street.
Yeah. Well, actually, if you know that bakso is not only made of meat, sometimes you know made from the fish. But of course, there is different taste with bakso made of meat and fish. People tend to to like more meat bakso rather than the fish bakso. So I don't think that you worried about that. So because the consumption of meat in Indonesia from time to time is increasing.
Pak Darmono, you...
What you might be surprised to know, actually, that bakso is the word coming from south of China. That is Fujian words. And pa mean pig or pork. So bakso is very famous food in Indonesia, eaten by most Indonesians. But actually, that means it's a meatball made of pork.
Most Indonesians wouldn't know that, I guess. Some questions, just over here. There's a microphone there.
My name's Serena Lillywhite from Oxfam, Australia. My question is to Ambassador Moriarty. I was very encouraged to hear you make reference to the contribution that Australian companies can play with regards to corporate accountability. And in particular, I'm interested to know what the Embassy and the mission in Indonesia is doing to promote corporate social responsibility, and in particular the idea of stakeholder engagement and good company-community relationships, and indeed building the capacity of civil society and women's groups at a community level as part of that corporate responsibility agenda.
Thanks, Serena. Look, our outreach to Australian business in Indonesia covers the gamut of issues, including the sort of regulatory environment, the investment climate, law, but it also very much deals, well, we engage with Australian business on how they are going to build their business and the community that they're going to impact on. Now, some companies have a plant or are very geographically located. It's easy to define in some ways, or relatively easy to define the community that you're impacting on, and I think the Australian business community can very well understand which parties they need to engage with, which are the ethnic or the community groups that they need to reach out and establish relationships with. I think that's one particular type of relationship. Other Australian businesses, particularly in services where you're not necessarily geographically located, but they too have a strong commitment to this corporate social responsibility agenda. And I've been very impressed with what I've learnt about the Australian business community and the IABC, their general approach to these issues. So when they come to the embassy, we just say, look, this is an important part of your work in Indonesia, and as an Australian company, you have a comparative advantage with this type of activity compared to companies from some other countries. And I think I'd just like Australian companies to realise that I mean, it may well have been the case that 20 years ago Indonesian ministers were not overly interested in what companies did in that corporate social responsibility area, but they certainly are now. And I think it's something when Australian companies are going to talk to officials or talk to ministers, they should be very upfront with what they're doing in that and very proud of it. Now, sometimes you might just get asked to do more. That's always the risk. But I think that a number of ministers have mentioned to me when they've mentioned Australian companies, they've talked about education and training that Australian companies do, or the corporate social responsibility work that some companies do. So it's just part of the dialogue that we have with business in the embassy, and I think it's something that Australian business generally does well in Indonesia, and certainly something that is increasingly on the radar of Indonesian ministers.
Right, a question just over here, Noke.
Okay, Kiroyan. I don't have a question. I just want to underline what Ambassador Moriarty has said, and also what Serena mentioned about corporate social responsibility. It's very important because there is also a misperception in Indonesia that corporate social responsibility is about raising funds. And some bupatis have actually interpreted that law, because in the Indonesian corporate law, law number 40 of 2007, it says that companies that are involved in the business of natural resources and or impacting natural resources are obliged to conduct corporate social responsibility. And some have interpreted that responsibility as being obliged to provide funds. And this would raise two important issues. First, in the realm of corporate governance, because if you give 2.5% of funds to the bupati, it may at the end be interpreted as providing gratification, which is a crime. And on the part of the public officials, the bupatis, it may also be interpreted that they are in breach of public governance, because the bupatis are accountable only for state budgets that they get from the central government. And these so-called CSR funds are not included in that. So there's a danger in doing corporate social responsibility as interpreted by some bupatis and also some ministers, because the Minister for Development of Underdeveloped Regions has said that he needed 22 trillion rupiah, and 2/3 of that he will raise through CSR funds. And there's no such thing as a CSR funds. You have a corporate social responsibility, and you develop your programs, and you need funds for that. But this doesn't mean that a certain amount has been set aside up front that can be tapped into by many public officials. Thank you.
We have a question up the back here.
My question is with Pak Darmono, yeah, being in the property business, Pak Darmono. Nishin Sunito is my name, yeah. If I could ask for your, if you could share some of your view in terms of the key business fundamental of property investment in Australia and in Indonesia, Pak Darmo, in terms of capital, liability, consumer, you know, paying deposit and all so on, a few other things.
Well, I think the basic difference between the property investment in Indonesia and in Australia is possibly over here. All the law or the regulation now very certain. In Indonesia, we still have, for example, no freehold except for Indonesian and individuals. When you have land in Indonesia under the freehold title, when you convert it into a manufacturing company, for example, then it has to be under corporate company and become 30 years land title, which is no longer freehold, but is 30 years leased. So this is possibly the handicap for doing business in property business in Indonesia. But again, this is a matter of habits or perception. As I mentioned this morning, that we in the industrial estate sold many hectares of land to foreign companies, and they are in the title of HGB or 30 years leased, which can be extended for another 3 years, another 30 years, and so on, with which the administration fee is very small. So it's about the habits which is different between Australia and Indonesia. But both, to me, offer safe investment to the countries, except it's the custom which is different. So when we go into property business, the it's not only about we are buying land for our own use, but this is also more about the investment portfolio. And as long as the price keep going up, then we will make money. I think this is no different between Indonesia and Australia. So if we want to do business in Indonesia in the property area, basically we just have to deal with reputable developer and with good license and so on, which guarantee certainty in that area. So again, it's about habits, it's about custom. And we have to choose the right partners if you want to invest in Indonesia in this area. But to me also, in Australia, it's the same thing. If you want to develop something in Australia, you also have to choose the right partner. I had my own experience. We invested in Perth. I invested about 15 years ago. And again, when I didn't have the right partner, also I didn't make any good investment. And I think that is very similar anywhere in the world. It's about choosing the right partner. But property is an investment portfolio. And although the regulation in Indonesia is still very, very at the early stage, but we can learn from Australia. For example, maybe 30, 40 years ago, also Australian policy was not to sell property to foreigners. But in Gold Coast, in the 15, 20 years ago, the law was changed there, and foreigners were allowed to invest in Gold Coast, and that was of property in Indonesia on average. I think it's double every 3 years. So this is a very, very good, investment. But again, normally, if you ask the lawyer, they will say, "Oh, this is not safe." Because indeed, there is a regulation which is not the same like in Australia. But there are ways and means that we can protect the investment for the buyers in that area. If anybody would like to know more, instead of not only consulting the lawyers, but you could also consult developers like myself. Thank you.
Right, do we have some more questions? We've got time for another 1 or 2 questions. No? No one's raised the question of traffic in Jakarta. The last time I was in Jakarta, it took me 5 hours to pick up some of my wife's sisters and go to the cemetery, and then we were going to Block M for lunch, and we got there about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, and that's in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day. So what's going to happen with traffic in Jakarta?
No, but I'll tell you that still there is an advantage, you know. Because if we want to listen a CD, for example, here in Canberra, not even one song that you can listen. But in Jakarta, you know.
Does anyone else like to comment? Okay, any further questions then? Right, it looks like we're ready for the reception then. That brings us to the close of this session. Thank you all very much for coming along. And please thank each of our panelists, Pak Darmono, Pak Primo, Greg Moriarty and Chris Barnes. Thank you very much.